the idea where I wanted to start is just where did your original idea, not the piano necessarily, but where did the expert in a week idea come from?
So it started last year, and I wanted to learn how to swim.
Okay, I remember this.
And so, like, I knew how to swim floating around in a pool and pretty much as far as I could hold my breath. But I wanted to swim like Michael Phelps, or like to actually be able to swim and breathe long distances, because I heard it was such a good exercise. And I hate running. I hate cycling. I hate doing like those types of cardio
Weightlifting,
workouts.
clearly.
Weightlifting, pretty much any exercise that doesn't involve a ball.
Yeah.
And so all I used was YouTube. And we have a kid in where I work who swam in high school. So every once in a while I'd kind of talk to him a little bit. But the first time I went, I was like, okay, I'm an athlete. I can figure this out. I could only go like the length of a pool, which the pool I was swimming was 25 yards. And then I run out of breath and I'd have to touch on the ground. Like I couldn't just swim. And so I started documenting it on Facebook for whatever reason. I was just like, oh, like if I document this, maybe it'll get other people who know how to swim and I'll get more tips that way. And then anybody else who maybe is into it.
Selfish.
Yeah, exactly. And so then the second time was miserable. I thought I was going to drown. And then third time was better. And then fourth time, there was just a thing that I saw online with like this flotation thing that you put between your legs. Because my big problem was I was kicking so hard. When you're taught to swim, it's like, oh, kick. You do all these kick drills. But to swim distance and to just go, you stay kind of parallel to the ground, but you don't have to kick like crazy. You just kind of flutter kicks in a way. And so this flotation device goes between your legs and it keeps your legs up. So you don't have to think about kicking, and it's all just figuring out your arms. For me, for most people, they use it to work out their arms. But for me, it got where I could learn how to breathe because I wasn't so worried about kicking, and it wasn't such a cardio workout in terms of getting exhausted from kicking. And so I was able to figure out how to breathe on the third or fourth session. And then by the seventh, I was able to swim a mile. And so it was like to go from barely even being able to go one thing to being able to swim a mile, I thought was pretty cool. And I was like, oh, that's 7 sessions. And then you look at someone like Michael Phelps or any of the professional swimmers, it's like that's hours and years of effort. So I was like, well, I wonder how good I can get in 7 sessions of anything, really. And so put it off, life happens, got busy. And then for the piano one specifically, my daughter takes piano lessons and she just hates practicing. And she always comes back with, I'm not good at this. And my son does the same thing in basketball. If he misses some shots, I'm not good at this. And he'll say like, I'm not as good as you, Dad. So in my mind, it's like, I've got 30 more years of playing basketball than he does and thousands of shots and everything else. Same with my daughter. I didn't have more piano experience than her, but it was like, if you just put in the time and effort, you can get good at stuff. And so there was a song that I really liked. And so with her observing all of this of like, hey, Dad doesn't know how to play the piano. And then after 7 days, like they'd come around and sit around and listen to me play. And like, oh, this sounds like the song and it sounds good. And yeah, I make mistakes, but it's night and day different from day one. And to show her like it isn't because I'm magic. It's not because I'm like overly talented. You just put in the time, focus on it, and get, I guess, the right instruction, and then you can figure things out.
So when you specifically with the piano, like you've never struck me as a musically gifted person.
I'm not.
In the years I've known you.
Yeah.
But do you truly think that it was just a time thing, that you were willing to sit down? Like the videos I know don't do it justice, that you, I mean, maybe let's start there. How many hours a day were you putting in for those 7 days? I know it was.
Yeah, and I probably should clarify, it's like 7 sessions in this instance. So in my line of work, our busy season is right now, and it's like crazy hour days type of stuff. And so there were days where like I wouldn't get home. There was no time for me to practice. And so there were 7 days where I was able to practice, essentially is what it was. And what was fortunate with that is it started going around my birthday and Christmas, which were weekends, Thanksgiving. So my birthday and Thanksgiving starting on a Thursday. So even during the busy season, I was able to get a little bit of time there. And so on the weekends, I'd probably say 2 hours a day on the weekends, because I would just kind of sit there and do my thing, go eat with the kids, whatever, do my thing. And Caitlin teaches, and we'd have whatever church on Sunday or whatever. And then it's just kind of downtime for everybody. And then I found out that my piano, this was later, my piano has like headphones. And so I could theoretically play it and not ruin it for everybody else, because everyone else heard it 300 times at this point. And so I probably put 20 hours is what I would guess.
Okay.
Over 7 sessions.
And so the song, I know one of your standards was that the song had to be reasonably difficult.
Yeah.
And you met with a piano instructor.
I was texting her.
Mm-hmm. What kind of level did she think that song was?
Well, it was, I had the text bubbles that come up in the video. Like that was, I changed my words a little bit, but those were her exact words in the text conversation, because I originally reached out to ask her if she knew of a public piano, which I think we can get into that story too. If I wanted to perform it publicly after you had that idea, and I didn't know where to find a public piano. And since she teaches and she does recitals and she does all this stuff, I was like, hey, do you know of one? And then her conversation was very much like, the malls will sometime have them, or like a senior center or a hospital. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, thanks. Like 20 minutes later, why? Like, what have you got in mind? And so I was like, oh, I'm just trying to learn a song and play it in public, just as a goofy idea to learn it in 7 days. And she's like, oh, okay, good luck. Let me know how that goes. And I was like, okay. And like 20 minutes later, what song are you thinking of playing?
Chopsticks.
Yeah, exactly. Mary Had a Little Lamb. And so I told her the song. And actually, I say it in the video, but Noelle, my daughter, was taking lessons from her, and they had a recital, and another kid played this song. And I had never heard it. And so he's playing it. I was like, wow, that's a really cool song. It's just pretty. I just thought it was a pretty song. And so I knew she would know what the song was. And so I told her the title of it, and she's like, that's pretty ambitious for someone who doesn't play the piano to learn in 7 days. I was like, yeah, I know, but I got like YouTube to help, and like I think I can figure it out.
Classic.
I can't read music, but I'll figure it out. And so she was like, well, my students who can read music, it takes them weeks, even months to learn that song and memorize it. So that's pretty ambitious if you want to learn it in 7 days. And so I just kind of like left it there, and it was kind of motivation. And I don't think she was saying it in a condescending way at all. I think she was just saying like, hey, realistically, that's a tougher song to just learn if you don't know how to read music. And so in my mind, I was like, well, I kind of want to prove now, not just to myself or to anyone else, but like, yeah, I want to show her like, hey, I could do it.
So Kelsey, my wife, plays piano. She's taken lessons her entire life. Her mom plays piano, teaches lessons. She teaches my kid lessons. We'll teach my younger kid lessons. She's an incredible pianist.
I didn't know that. I should have.
Kelsey's really good, but hates performing in front of people.
Yeah.
But when she saw the song you were playing, she was blown away that you could memorize it in a week. That she's like, I could probably learn to play that, but I would always need the sheet music. Not always, but I'd need the sheet music for a really long time until I could memorize it.
Yeah.
So her and I were talking about it and saying kind of like, well, I don't think Eric had another option because he had to memorize it because he doesn't know how to do anything else. I mean, I guess you could have that. Like I saw like the YouTube video you're watching where it has like the almost like the Dance Dance Revolution thing.
I thought like Guitar Hero, like the things are like falling down. Mm-hmm.
But obviously that's going too fast by the time like you kind of really get going. So so in terms of memorizing it, were you breaking off chunks, or were you just, once you got into a kind of rhythm, you could kind of see where it was going?
I couldn't really see it, but as I was saying, like 20 hours probably. I have probably 20 hours worth of footage because I just set up a camera and I record myself playing and going through the YouTube stuff. And I just didn't put it in the final video because that's kind of boring to watch me for hours and hours looking at stuff and screwing up 1,000 times. But I do the little time lapse where I'm listening through it and I write out, all right, there's like a bass sequence of this song and it goes that da 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 da. And so that's kind of the bass sequence for me. And so I was like, okay, that bass sequence happens here. And then it repeats itself with a little bit of a variation here. And then it goes into what I called like twinkle fingers. I just called it whatever in my mind.
Technical piano term.
It's the twinkle fingers that you throw on your
Kelsey
right hand.
said that one multiple times when she's teaching Eli. Get the twinkle fingers.
You're not doing the twinkle fingers right. And so that happens, and in the first time that happens, it repeats itself twice with your left hand doing the same thing, and then it does something just a little quicker, twinkle fingers, twice with the left hand lower. And so I'm just going through and breaking this down. Okay, that repeats itself. This kind of basic thing with a little bit of a variation repeats itself. And then I go back to the bass sequence with a little bit of a change. And so there's just sections of it that were the same. So I was like, oh, if I can figure out the bass sequence of it, then that happens like 6 or 8 times throughout the song. And then if I can memorize the twiddle fingers section, some version of that happens 8 times during this song. And so then I just have to figure out the beginning, and then I have to figure out the end. And that's just kind of how I went about that.
This is not a short song either. I was kind of blown away by that.
That
it's not like a normal.
It gets really long when you're in front of people.
3.5 minute song like you hear on the radio. It's quite long.
Yeah, it's. But I think if you break it down like that, and again, when we were talking about how hard is the song, there are definitely harder songs for sure to play that have a lot more going on and aren't as repetitive. So this one was good in the fact that it was repetitive for me to memorize it. But I envy her and other people who can read music because I can play one song now, but she can play any song. Like she can sit down to a piano and figure out any song. I just have one. And if I want to learn another one, I have to put in another 20 hours to figure out another one.
Or you could
learn to read music.
Yeah. Maybe that's the next expert in a week is.
When I say that, like I legitimately got fired by my piano teacher when I was little because I would do that. I'd memorize it. And so I'd go to lessons. And so she's like, all right, play this. And she'd come up with a new song with the notes and I wouldn't know how to read it. But if I took it home and in that week I'd memorize it. And so instead of me like watching the notes, I'm just watching my fingers the whole time. And so the way that I got fired is kind of funny because I had several other friends at school who took lessons from her. And she went to my mom and she was like, I'm not teaching piano anymore. And so we're like, oh, okay. And then I just never continued anything. And then like a year later, some of the kids were like, why aren't you playing anymore? I was like, oh, my piano teacher quit. And they're like, no, she didn't. She's still teaching us.
Miss Jones?
Yeah, she's still teaching us. I was like, oh, apparently she just subtly fired me in a way because I wasn't listening.
It's a long winding down process.
Yeah.
Just started with one less student.
Yeah.
Going back, so I wanted to ask this for the original idea of this. So every one of your, I guess the majority of your podcasting via Man Games or whatever it is very motivational. Like it's, hey, let's bring people together. Let's do things. Like I want to hear stories of how you became successful or whatever it case may be, or your highs and lows of being an athlete. Was that a motivation in this to show people like basically, hey, if you want to do something, it's just about a lot of it is effort.
Yeah. And I think effort's a part of it. I do think that, hand-eye coordination helps in piano specifically. Like if I were to try to do a feat of strength as the next challenge, like I'm not strong. And so I think that would have a potential to maybe hurt me in a different way. But the main thing started with my kids because they were like, I'm bad at piano, therefore I'm a bad kid. Or I'm bad at basketball, therefore I'm a bad person. And so the whole point was like, you're not a bad person or you're not an inadequate human being because you don't do something that you've never tried before well, or that you just started learning well. And we've talked about this with Jared, but I see a lot of myself in him if he's just like a perfectionist, and especially with sports. And I was the same way. And I think to a certain degree I still am, but this kind of helps me in that regard of like, hey, like the only way to learn something is to fail a lot. And then you figure out how to fix it. And so I think motivationally for other people, Caitlin, the people in my life, they feel the same thing. Oh, I'm not good at this. And so I'm failing somehow. Right. And I think that that's not necessarily the case. I think that there are things that you and me, there are things that you've spent so much more time on. And that's really the only differentiator between the two of us on certain things. And same thing with me. There's things that I've spent more time on. the fact that I know something about Medicare isn't because I'm a genius. It's because I spent the last 3 years diving into Medicare where you couldn't care less about Medicare, right? And that's not a crazy thing. It's just time.
Well,
And
I'll be more into it with time.
yeah. Well, and being surrounded by people that can help with that, right? And the piano, like the difference between where I was at after day 5 and where I got from day 6 to when I ultimately did it, which was day 12, was dramatic because I went to that friend of ours who had the sheet music and she helped me with some of the parts that I was not quite understanding. And so when she was able to point those out and then I could finally figure those out, it was a huge jump versus kind of like a slow, steady improvement from days 1 through 5. I think the same thing with the right coaching and being surrounded by the right people. Our hard work can get us so far, but then that can double, triple, whatever exponential growth with the right instruction correcting you real time.
Okay. So moving forward with this idea of expert in a week, do you think that's an important aspect? There's a portion of this, idea that you have to do by yourself, put in the effort to see how far you can come, and then at some point you call in an expert that will help push you along on that process.
I think it will depend on the activity. So flying a plane came up as an idea, like learn to fly a plane in 7 days. I've been talking with John a little bit about it. And so for my own efforts on that, I don't know that would really work. Like for me to just go steal a plane. But I think that the sooner I can get an expert involved, the better, for a couple of reasons. I think that I'll just pick like boxing as an example, right? Like if it was to be boxing, because I'm not a fighter and I'm not tough and whatever. So boxing would be kind of an interesting one, where if I go into a gym and they're a good gym and I can show like this gym I can take a beginner and make them adequate in 7 days. Now, yeah, I have to put in the time and like dedicate 2 hours a day or whatever it is. But I think that will help any of the partnerships that I'm able to make through this of look at how good they are at instructing, because it makes a big difference. And I can get a day 1, go up and have me get knocked out or whatever and just get the crap beat out of me. But then day 7, I don't die. I would hope to bring in partners earlier in this case.
Okay.
This one, I was pretty self-conscious, like, right? I still am. And like that airport thing genuinely was one of the most scary experiences of my life because I don't like attention and I don't like public attention. And so that was hard for me. And then to go to somebody and show them that I suck at piano, I just like felt bad. I would feel bad if it was just, hey, teach me this song. And I was crappy at it.
So along the process, so you have the first day, you pick the song, you start learning it, you find those 3 videos and you kind of narrow it down to 1 video by, I think you said day 3, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So day 1 to 3, which day was the hardest in your mind?
Day 1 was hard because it was that Dance Dance Revolution Guitar Hero type thing. And so I would see it and they have the keyboard there and then I'd have to pause the video to see where all of the things lined up and then where the next ones would line up. And then I'd push play and it would go so fast. And so that first day was so frustrating because it was like, okay, this doesn't seem that hard, but I can't ever figure it out. And then the timing of when do I push this note with this hand compared to when I push it with this hand. So the timing was really hard to get. And then the second day I switched to the other video he's a German guy. And it's probably instructionally the best video. It just had more in it that I didn't really care to go for. But he takes it very slowly and he does that. Like, okay, when you push this, then you're going to push this. And then it lights up on the keyboard and he keeps repeating it. So I could keep repeating it, right? So he's like, here's the thing, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And he'd do it again and then he'd do it again. It's probably 4 or 5 times. And so then I could do it along with him rather than the rest of the song skipping by. And then the last one, the lady was similar. She moved a little bit quicker, actually a lot quicker because the guy, I think probably has an hour and a half worth of stuff for that. And then hers was 20 minutes or whatever, but same thing. She had the sheet music up, but then you could see her hands and it would light up on the keyboard of where she was doing and she'd repeat stuff and go through stuff. So day 1 was the hardest. Day 3, it started to get a lot better.
So day 1 hardest because it's just so new that you're trying to learn a skill that obviously when you start out, you're terrible at.
I think if I would have started with the other videos on day one, it would have been easier. This goes to like a better instructor, because the other 2 videos were meant to be instructional tutorial videos on how to play this song. The other one was a cover of it. It wasn't like an instructional thing at all. It was just a guy who's a huge YouTube channel and he plays pretty piano songs. Like he does Interstellar, he does all of those things. And he's not trying to teach you, it just shows you what he's doing and how fast it goes and it lights up and it's fun. So I think that having the right instructor made it a lot better than, right? Like if you and I were to go watch Michael Jordan moves and go try to replicate him, that's different than having Michael Jordan tell you how to do it, even if it's virtually, right? But
at any point, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 5, was there ever a point where you were kind of like, I think this is a bad idea?
I don't think it was ever a bad idea. I wasn't planning on performing it until day 6 or whatever it was. Yeah, day 6 was when we had our Friendsgiving. So all through that, I was like, oh, I'll record it and it'll just be at my house and it's no big deal. And actually the last one, if you make it all the way through, the last one's at my house and you can hear my family, like they would clap because it's just in my living room. But so I'm like, what's the worst that could happen? And I could just play it 1,000 times and then I'll pick the best version of it. And so it wasn't too bad. But then the airport one really amped that up because it was like, I can't just sit here in the airport and play this 500 times until I get a good take. And I mess up in the one, which was so frustrating because I didn't usually mess up on that part as I was leading up to it. And I messed up right there. But there are other parts that I normally did mess up on that I got okay. So it's probably just.
Okay. So let's talk about the performance aspect. So we have Friendsgiving. You're talking about this process you're going through. It's something you and I have talked about before that hey, I'm going to try to do expert in a week. This is my idea. You know, I didn't know you were going with piano at this time. And then I say, hey, well, why don't you, I think it's more funny if you perform it.
Yeah.
I probably, to a fault, I always am looking for some humor in something.
Yeah.
You know, it seems boring to watch you play piano, but you know, if I get to see you go embarrass yourself, which would always be hopeful because I only see Eric succeed ever, then I want to watch it.
Yeah.
So you asked the piano instructor, where can I perform it?
Mm-hmm.
So what was your first attempt of somewhere to perform?
Yeah, so I sent it out on Facebook as well. You're not on Facebook, so you don't see all of my hilarious stuff on Facebook. But I put it out on Facebook. So a lot of things came in of like care centers. We have one just across the street. So I went into the care center. No one was at the front desk. It's just empty. And I'm like, again, I don't like attention. I don't like being in public, and I'm not good just on the fly with things. And so just like, well, I'm going to give up on this idea. So I go to leave, and you need a code to get out of the care center. And I don't have the code because there's nobody at the reception desk. So I'm stuck in this care center now, just kind of hanging out. And I don't know where the piano is. And so finally, a gentleman is there visiting his mom in the care center. And he's like, all right, Mom, love you. And I'm just kind of standing there awkwardly. And so he goes out the door and I just follow him out because he knew the code. So tried the care center. Wasn't a great idea. She mentioned the malls. And so Southtown Mall I go there and they've got this huge stage all set up for FM 100 has a concert series in the mall. And then there's this bright red piano just all by itself in the middle of the stage. And it's all roped off. So I was like, oh, this would be perfect. Like to just come in here and play in a mall in terms of ramping up the anxiety and everything else.
And less stressful, I would assume, than the airport because, you know, malls these days can be a little dead.
Well, we'll get to that because as I'm looking to it, pianos, I don't know how pianos work, but every piano I've seen, like it's closed and then you can kind of like prop it open and that's how you get it to be louder for everybody else. So this was all closed down. And so I was like, well, I don't really know how pianos work. So I can't really like go up there and just start playing. So then I call the mall while I'm there. I'm like, hey, how do I play that piano? They're like, oh, it's the management team. Go to them. Where is that? So they tell me I didn't know that there's like offices in the mall. So I found those and then get a card for someone, send an email out. I was like, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm trying to learn this song in a week. And then I'd like to play it publicly. Can I use that piano there? And she's like, no, it's not for the public. You can't use that. And so I go to Fashion Place Mall. There's no piano there. And then some other people mentioned the hospitals have pianos. And so I reached out to the hospitals I'd call. And I felt really bad calling hospitals about a piano because like people are having emergencies and they have like their lives at stake. And I was like, hey, can I play your piano? But they all said, no, you have to volunteer. You have to be a volunteer at the hospital. And that requires like 100 hours or something like that to be an official volunteer. I was like, well, I got 2 days, so I can't really fulfill that obligation. And so then a neighbor of ours he's like the COO of the airport. And so I was like, hey, how do I get to that? And so he's like, reach out to this gal. She's over all of that stuff. So I call her and she was like, look, to get to the piano, you have to get past security. So that's kind of your hurdle. It's a public piano. Anybody can play it, but you kind of need a ticket to get past security. So if you can't find anywhere else, talk to me. But that's kind of what you're faced with. So I was like, okay. And I couldn't find anywhere else. And so I bought a ticket for me and Colton to go fly somewhere. And then we got past security, and that's how we went in
Where'd you buy a ticket to?
Vegas.
Vegas.
It was the cheapest.
Some poor person trying to get home for
No, there were plenty of rooms.
Thanksgiving. You and Colton stole their seats.
But so it was over Thanksgiving weekend, which is the busiest travel day of the year. But I went into the mall on Black Friday because in my mind, I was like, what if I just did it? I mean, it's just like what you see at movie theaters, those barriers that have the little clips and then they go into themselves. I mean, it's not high security thing here. So I go to Southtown Mall over Black Friday and it is packed. I was like, this would be, from a video perspective, this would have been awesome because it is like slowly moving through the halls packed with people on Black Friday. And so if I could have just popped up on that stage and just started playing, but it was all roped off, a lot more people there. And so then after the fact, Colton and I went to Southtown Mall to shoot kind of B-roll to show that we had tried Southtown, like the mall, and it didn't work. And so we show up, and every time I'd gone there, the stage was just completely empty. And I went around like lunchtime. So I was like, it's the mall and it's no longer Thanksgiving weekend. Like it's not going to be anything. So I go there and there's chairs lined up all around the stage and it's just filled with people. So the concert series was actually happening the one day I didn't want it to happen. And Ryan Shoup and the Rubber Band were playing there. And so everyone's standing around the stage and Colton's following me with a camera. So I walk up and I just kind of stop by the stage. And so these people are like, are you playing? And I was like,
Ryan?
I was like, yeah, I thought he had less hair than you. And so I was just like, no, this isn't me. And so then we're like, well, we'll just get some other shots around the mall that showed that I was walking around the mall at the time. So we're walking around and like a security guard comes up and he was like, are you with the media? Are you with the press here? I was like, no. Are you with the band? No. You can't record here. Like you got to get out of the mall if you're going to be recording here. So we get kicked out of the mall, which I guess in the long run, like we wouldn't have been able to do it anyway at the mall. So that's kind of the big, long story of how it all happened at the airport. But I thought it turned out really nice for the airport. And yes, there were people there listening, but at the airport, everybody's kind of in their own world and whatever, right? Like plugged into headphones or whatever. So it wasn't quite as much people focused in on me, but there was still quite a bit of people there.
Yeah, when you watch the video, well, yes, there's people walking by in the background, like getting to wherever they're going, but there are quite a few people watching.
Yeah, and we're tucked away. Like the piano, I don't know if you've ever seen it there at the airport. It's kind of huge glass windows. It's not where people are getting on the planes. It's in this central corridor where they have restaurants and stuff, but it's not like where everybody is congregating.
So one of the people, you and I talked about this, one of the people that was watching you wanted to do a duet with you.
Yeah, so we get there and we're setting up the cameras. You can see them in the videos. We had 3 cameras. Colton was holding one, and we had one on each side pointing at me. So we're setting all of this up, and this couple comes up. And so the gal was like, hey, do you want to play a duet? And I was like, I know one song. Like,
you know,
yeah, do you know?
Do you know the second part of this?
Yeah, can you do the top hand? Because I know the bottom hand. And so I was like, I know one song. Oh, what song is it? And I was like, A River Flows in You. And she knew what that was. And so I was like, oh, do you play the piano? And she's like, yeah, I play. And so I was like, okay, cool. And she's like, you play your stuff and then I'll listen. And the husband was super nice. He's just like, yeah, this is great. What are you doing? What's your channel name? Like, we'll subscribe. This is awesome. Just super nice. Just getting the story. So I play through it. The husband goes and gets drinks for them. So as I'm kind of getting into the groove or whatever, he's gone. And then I played it really quietly to just kind of, because pianos are different too. That's the other thing to bring up is my piano is an electric piano that we got. And I didn't know this, but there are settings you can change with that. But the setting that I had it on, no matter how hard you pushed the key, it was the same volume. And on a real piano, if you push it softer, it's quieter. And if you push it harder, it's louder. And so as I get to this piano, I'm just trying to feel out like, okay, how hard do I have to push these keys? So I'm playing it super soft. And then he comes back, and then the version that everybody sees is the version that I played once he got back. And so then I get up, and she wanted to play too. And so we just switched seats. And so he was like, we're just talking, where are you from, all of that stuff. And so I was like, oh, are you a doctor? He had talked about grad school and all this stuff. I was like, oh, are you a doctor? He's like, well, I have a PhD. And he's like, so does she, and it's in the piano. So I didn't even know a PhD in piano was a thing, but she has a PhD in the piano. So when you talk about an expert now, we get talking, and he was like, for decades, she practiced 10 hours a day for decades. And so it's like, that's the difference, right? Like, she probably has talent, like I think anybody can do. But if you're doing anything 10 hours a day for 25, 30 years, you're going to be impressive. And so she gets up there, she just has her phone, and she pulls up a song that she's never played before, plays it beautifully. It's awesome. It's amazing. And then he was like, hey, play that other song that you have. And Pockbell's Canon, in I think is what it's called. I really like the song. It's popular at weddings, and I'm sure you'd recognize it. But she plays her own version of that is just unbelievable. I mean, it's just got a lot more twiddled fingers than the normal version has. And it's just so cool. And it was cool to see the contrast. And she was super nice around like my performance or whatever. And the little clap you hear is from her and another person sitting there. But that was awesome. I mean, that was super cool to just experience that.
So when you told her about what you're trying to do, learn a song in a week or 7 sessions, did she seem to think that was, a feat, or was that just kind of like,
no,
oh, good for you?
I don't think I'm good at selling it, because so the email that I wrote to them all was kind of like, hey, I'm learning a song in a week. I don't play the piano. Can I come play your really nice piano in front of your patrons? And so they're like, that's cool, but no. And so like I tell them the idea, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. Right. They were nice about it, but it wasn't like all right, like do your thing, and then can I play after? It was kind of what I think it was. And then I played through it, and then they were super nice. Like, what are they going to say? Hey, that sucked. Like, yeah, you clearly you have only been practicing for 7 days. So they were super nice. They were super great about all of it. That was awesome. What are you going to do next? All of that stuff. So she was super, super good about it. And I think I surprised myself personally, like as I was thinking through of the song and everything else and where I was after day 5. There's the one pretty major mistake, I guess. I just got a little bit off. So there's like this awkward pause in the middle of the song. But other than that, I think like if you don't know the song, you don't even know whether I messed up or not. And if I don't pause. And that's what I think good players can do too, is that they can kind of mask any mistake, and they just kind of go with it and figure it out. But mine very clearly, I was like, oh crap. Because I've memorized it, like if I get off, I have to find where I can get back to where I remember.
Instead of playing it out. I mean, I think that's the case in anything that people do more frequently. Like, for example, you play basketball all the time. If your shot is just a little bit different than another time, usually you can make up for it in a different, just because it's happened before. Yeah. Well, this is probably, it's the first time you screwed up in front of everyone at an airport. Yeah. But really the first time you've screwed up with the pressure.
Yeah. And again, on a part that I wasn't concerned about. Like, as a part that's coming up, I guess as I'm practicing this song throughout the week, there are certain parts that I know are going to give me trouble. And then I know the parts around the parts that are going to give me trouble because I know, okay, if I screw this up, I just quickly get back to home base over here. But when it's in a part where it's like I don't think about it as much, it's like, oh crap. Like I'm not used to starting over from this spot. I'm used to starting over from the problem spots. And so it just took a little bit of a time to be like, wait a minute. Like, okay. And then we got back to where we needed to go. But the pressure was real. I mean, again, you see it in like my foot is shaking the whole time that I'm playing, which is kind of hard to, because I feel it. Like I know it's happening in my mind. I'm like, stop shaking. I'm just going through the song. But yeah, getting up for those when I know a tough part's coming. Yeah, it's different.
So with the public performance or just the big ending to it, would it be helpful to know, because you found out, I mean, didn't find out, it was a joke and kind of goofing around and talking about it, only a few days before you actually decided to go out and do it. Well, a few days before, a few practice sessions before you ended this thing. Would it be more beneficial to know earlier exactly what your end goal is, or was it kind of fun in retrospect to kind of figure it out on the fly?
I to know earlier would have been better, because I didn't even have it in my mind to do that until you brought it up. So I think to know earlier, I could put myself in positions that would make me more comfortable. Because again, all of this is just experience and time, right? Like I was more nervous doing that than I would be to play at the Delta Center in a basketball game, because I've done that and I know what that experience is like. And yeah, excitement or pressure or whatever is there, but I know what that feels like. I didn't know what this would feel like. And so had I known earlier, I probably would have gone and practiced in more public settings, or I would have figured things out like that where I just, okay, this is what it's like in front of people. Even practicing, like I played it in front of my in-laws, and that was nerve-wracking. Like just to know that somebody else was there listening changes the entire dynamic of me just goofing off on my piano. Because like, oh, show us what you're doing. Like, let's see how it's going. And just be like, crap, like don't be an idiot. So to know earlier, again, I think I can just mitigate that. There will always be that pressure and that excitement, but I can mitigate that a little bit more if I know what's happening.
So maybe in terms of, I guess it depends on whether we want to see you succeed at it, or if we want entertainment value of you.
Exactly. Are you entertained by my failures, or you want to see something cool?
Well, to be clear, like there's no one that I have talked to, like as I'm coming here, I'm talking to one of our good friends, Tyler, about this.
Yeah.
My wife watched it, her family watched it, and it's clear that it's not only that no one think it was a failure, but everyone was like kind of blown away that you could even accomplish this in 7 sessions.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing I take away from this. And I hopefully I think talking to you previously, you talked about how your daughter now is showing more of an interest in piano, at least watching you play piano or things like that, that it is truly a motivation to say like, well, maybe it truly is that I'm just not putting in enough effort into the things that I want to be better at.
Yeah. And with her, it's been fun. I put a few clips in there of her playing. And so she'll know certain parts and then for me to play the other part or whatever else. But with her, I asked her, I was like, why are you so willing to spend time playing this now when it's like pulling teeth to get you to practice anything else? And she's like, well, you're playing it. And I think I like this song. And so I want to learn this song rather than the songs that a teacher gives her or just like the drills to get through things. And that goes to like Kelsey or any real piano player is at. And I try to tell my daughters, like, look, you and I can memorize the steps to this song and then we can play this song. But she likes, there's a new song, Gimme Love by Sia, that has a piano thing in there. And I was like, if you learn to read music, you can play that. You can play NF. You can play any song you want, but you have to know how to do the drills to do that. And so, yeah, there's a fun part. So how do you balance doing something that you genuinely love and want to pursue versus kind of the mundane stuff that will help you get there with anything in life, with math, with sports, with piano? It's finding that balance of I want to do what's fun for me, but also what's not fun is probably going to get you to be more accomplished later. So, does that answer?
No, it did. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was that's been fun with her though. And same with my son. He played basketball for like a little neighborhood activity, and he came home just crying, and he was just like, I only made 3 shots. And I was like, oh, how many did you take? 100. And it wasn't 100, but it's just 1 billion. And so he gets really sad about that. And I was like, well, let's backtrack on that, because we have an 8-foot rim in our house and outside. You can adjust it, but he plays at 8 feet. It's like, how tall were the baskets? They were 10 feet. I'm like, okay. And what ball were you using? And you had people guarding you. Like, there's a lot that changed. And so you're not bad at basketball. You just got put in an environment that you were not used to. And so you just play in that environment a few more times and you'll be fine. So he had his junior jazz game. He did great. And he didn't go 3 for 100. He just did his thing. And it's the second time being in this little group. And now it'll just get better every time. So it's using the piano and talking to him. I kind of said the same thing. Like, Jared, you're not bad. You just haven't done it enough. Hopefully that works.
So with the piano specifically, do you have any desire to learn more songs, or is this kind of like, well, I did it?
I would love to learn more songs. I still play that song every day, like, just because I enjoy it. It was fun to learn. It would be fun to learn another song as well. I fear that I will lose everything that I learned on this song. So if anybody ever does watch that video and I'm at some family gathering, like, oh, play this song, like, I'm like, oh,
Sorry, I learned a new one.
It's like a test. Like, it's gone. It was there and then it's gone. But I would like to learn new ones. But it's a time thing again. Like, I'm going to allocate time to some other videos like this. And so to find the time to do another song while doing my real life normal job and whatever else comes of this is
so
limited.
Let's go to that. What
Yeah.
comes of this? What do you want to do next? What do you think is going to be funny next, or motivational next, or where do you want to go with this?
So I have a couple of things in the works. One is relatively, it's pretty simple to pull off. So I've never been able to do a handstand. So I want to learn to do a handstand, but then in 7 days, I want to see how far can I walk on my hands.
Okay.
If I can even do a handstand in 7 days. Because again, I'm not strong and my shoulders have never been strong. And so I want to see if I can do a handstand, and then how far can I walk. Day 1, it'll be 3 feet because I'll just fall. And then if after 7 days, can I walk the length of a basketball court? Can I walk the length of my driveway? Like, what is that going to look like? So that's kind of the easier one, I think. But after this one, a good friend of mine from high school, his wife, reached out, and she was on Lego Masters. And she made it to the semifinals of Lego Masters this most recent season. So she reaches out and she was like, hey, do you want to learn to be a builder? And she was like, I could send you a kit. I've got all of these connections that are all over the world. We could do a Zoom call. We could teach you kind of the fundamentals of building stuff with Legos, see how good you can get in 7 days. I'm like, that's awesome. I think that would be super cool, because I don't play with Legos. And I've always, like, I could build the classic houses where you just build it up as high as you can. And they're like, crap, I have no idea how to get a roof on this. So you just throw something on it. So I think that would be kind of cool. She built like a roller coaster that was unbelievable.
Eli and I watch Lego Masters. We love Lego Masters.
Have you seen the most recent season?
I don't know if I have.
Yeah.
We just throw on various episodes.
Yeah.
He just likes to look what they're making, and then we watch that episode. So it's never a continuous thing.
Yeah. So those are 2 that I think would be cool. John mentioned flying. Not John, but actually at the airport, there was another gal who was sitting there listening and talking with her. She was like, hey, when this channel gets big enough and you're making money off of it, you should learn to fly in 7 days. And so when she said that, I reached out to John. I was like, hey, how realistic is this? And he's like, you'd have to spend like 2 hours a day. He's like, but yeah, we've had people solo after 7 days. And so I'm like, that would be crazy. I am horrified of flying. So that would be like,
I don't want any part of that one.
That would be severe anxiety happening. But how cool would that be? Like, you just in 7 days, you learn how to fly a plane. And again, thinking of that flight school, how cool would that be for them to say, like, in 7 days, if you put in the time, you'll be flying. You'll be able to fly a plane or die.
You don't get any complaints because
Yeah.
either do it, you
Yeah.
succeed, or
Yeah.
you're dead. Dead people can't make complaints.
That's a big one. I'm nervous about, and it's expensive. And so that's where, if this channel ever gets monetized and we start making money, then maybe that can happen. But I think like the Lego one and the handstand one is something that could happen pretty quickly.
I don't mean to brag, but I can do a handstand for a really long time. Did you know this about me?
I did not.
Yeah, I could. I'll show
You
you.
just always have, or do you remember learning it?
My parents signed me up for gymnastics when I was really little.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wanted to because I watched the Olympics and I was like, those guys are buff and cool.
They're awesome.
And so they signed me up for gymnastics and I did it for 1 year and I was surprisingly really good at it. But I learned to do a handstand, I learned to do like some flips and things like that, and still can kind of just do it. But this was like 3rd grade and I was like, I don't really want to do that anymore. I think my brothers made fun of me and I didn't want to do it anymore. They're big football players and tiny little gymnast was not cool.
Should have pursued it.
I should have.
I love the gymnast stuff.
I got the build for it.
Well, like that's what makes handstands a little bit tricky for me is I'm a little bit taller than you. And
slightly.
So the height, I don't see a lot of 6'4" guys doing handstands. Let's put it that way. Not that there aren't any. It's just the people that I see that are really good at handstands are not 6'4".
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Your idea of the comedy show is still on my mind too, because that would be one where that's hard. Like being able to make people laugh for an extended period of time. Like we'll just have quick-witted humor jokes back and forth or whatever where we laugh and we think it's funny, but like to genuinely put together something where people are coming expecting you to make them laugh, that's a whole nother ballgame, man.
And that's so some of these things, like the ideas that we've talked about, like comedy specifically or something like that, is, you know, it's a kind of that battle between, is this just a skill that people have? Because there's people that are just always funny, you know, always, anytime you're around them, they're making you laugh. It's not that they're comedians or anything like that. They're just genuinely funny people. But is it something that if you put time in, you thought about it, you were drafting jokes, you were coming up with routines, you were trying to, you know, the performance aspect of it, how to deliver it, if you were going through that hour by hour for a day and 7 days, could you figure out something that was at least okay, you know?
And that's what's, because I've listened to stuff from comedians. Joe Rogan's obviously up there. Nate Bargatze, who I really like, and you know who he is. Just listening to their stuff and the amount of time that they put into their stuff. Plus, they're always around comedians, kind of bouncing off these ideas. And so that's where it's hard, where if I had a coach of sorts that could kind of help with that, and I know there are things like that that are improv type things, but somebody to help through that. The thing that I get nervous around with comedy is how many of my ideas are my ideas, right? Like, how do I avoid plagiarizing somebody else? Because then it's not really me doing it. It's like, oh, I copied a joke that I thought was funny from somebody else. So coming up with like a truly original comedic routine when that's not what I do would be really challenging, and it'd be really interesting. And I think that you could do a lot of stuff on your end of that, of putting me in front of a room with awkward people to make it really uncomfortable. Get like ex-girlfriends or something in a room, or man games, girl games, or whatever.
Every person that doesn't want wants vengeance on Eric.
And then you just tell them like, don't make a sound. And so it's just super awkward.
Boo
the whole time. Yeah. So that one would be interesting. That scares me.
But with the channel and moving forward because while the piano, I think it's going to be universally kind of thought that this was a huge success for you, that you did something that was impressive. You learned a song that, at least from my point of view, sounds beautiful and incredibly difficult. But there's probably going to be instances of things that you don't do as well at. So with the channel, is the hope to be able to show that how much you can, how you can get from point A to point Z in 7 sessions? Or do you think that it's going to be just as beneficial if you show, well, I didn't get to Z. I only got to C.
Yeah, I think 2 things come of that. One, I think that I'll be able to show that there are certain things that we talk about a handstand, right? There are certain things that just me as an individual aren't super conducive to that skill set or that activity, right? And so we'll see if I just never be able to do a handstand because I'm not strong enough or I don't have the balance or coordination or whatever else. And then the second thing that I hope comes of this is that not just me, but everyone who watches can get a true appreciation of the real experts in that, right? And I think we've talked about it, but it's like it'd be so fun in the Olympics to see just an average person going at the same time as these swimmers, right? And I did that when I was learning swimming. I was like, all right, after I'd gotten to where I could breathe and everything, I'm going to go down and back, which is a 50-meter yard swim. I'm going to time it and see how fast I am compared to the world record, which was stupid to do. And a couple of things with that. But so I do it. I go down and back. And I think when I did it, my time was like 41 seconds or something like that. The world record was like 18. And so it's like they're down and they're halfway back before I've even gone halfway in my little time trial. Now they are diving off, which I wasn't diving off, and then they can flip turn way better than I can. But the point is like, for me, that was an eye-opening experience of like, I think I'm pretty fast now because I've swam in my life and now I know how to breathe and stay relatively parallel. But they're fish. Like it's a whole different level of abilities. And so I think I almost want to go through all of these activities and rank them. Like, okay, how hard is this activity to do? Like to learn how to bowl, like how does that compare to a stand-up comic routine? Like, do I think I could become a really good bowler in less time than curling or piano or whatever else, right? Like to truly be an expert piano player, no chance for me. I could play a song, as we've talked about, but to be able to read music and actually play songs, super difficult. Handstand, I don't think I'd put in that same category. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
So I think ultimately what I would like to do is showcase how hard certain things are, and then for everybody else that holds super easy things as being really hard, show them that they're not that cool.
Well, I think so. When I think about it, I think there's certain like bowling or anything really that includes an athletic element. You know, I think it's you're not the person for it that I want to watch because I think you'll get too good at it too fast and it's not going to be fair.
I think there's some big exceptions.
Piano and things like that I love to watch you because it does show you're an average person that can, with time, effort, and just pushing through, it shows that any of us could figure something out if we just tried harder.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge aspect of every element of all of our lives, that there's a certain point where you push to it and most of us just go, this isn't for us. This isn't for me. And if you can push past that point, you can probably be just fine and get good at it or get okay at it or enjoy it. It's just that I know for me, at least, I get to a point, and if I'm not immediately succeeding, it's just kind of like, maybe this isn't worth it.
Well, and I think that's kind of along the 80-20 rule of stuff. If like you put in time and you can get 80% good pretty quick, but then it's those next steps to finally get to where you're really good that takes so much more time. So there's that kind of cost benefit type of time analysis that happens in a lot of that. But yeah, I think that I sent the first version of that video to you for feedback. And then you had mentioned like, hey, you need to put you getting mad earlier. And that's another thing that I think is important to see too, is that we watch movies, right? And movies in 2 hours, they can go from sad story to heroic ending, and you don't see everything in between. And you can cover so much ground. It Suits, right? With Harvey Specter and Mike Ross. In a matter of a 30-minute episode, they've done all of this research. They've found everything. They're able to come up with every possible argument and find every historical case, when in reality, that takes weeks, months, years to put together that same kind of thing. So with this, again, I took 20 hours and condensed it into 15 minutes. But the point is, there are a lot of moments there where you're just like, this is so frustrating. Like, sucks. And I think that's with anything that's hard, that you're trying to learn a new skill, is you're going to do it wrong. And then you're going to do it wrong again. And you're going to make that same mistake, and you're going to get mad at yourself. And it's really easy to be like, well, I'm done. Like, I'm out because I'm bad or I'm not good enough. But eventually you figure it out, and then you are good at it. And now I don't get mad at myself at all for playing that song. I probably would for other songs, but for that song, even if I mess up, it's like, I know what to do and I can figure it out and go. But yeah,
So I gave you feedback. I'm sure other people have given you feedback, but what's been the general response from people that you've talked to about?
It's hard for me because I trust you a lot, and we'd been conversing about this a lot. So I sent it to you. I sent it to Colton, the videographer, for feedback on the edits and stuff. And so I haven't gotten a lot of feedback in that sense of whatever. The in-laws and my dad and mom are like, oh, that's cool. My big thing with that is, like, I would really like to grow this channel, and I have another channel on YouTube for my real job, and growing on YouTube is really hard. And so that was more of like, feedback-wise for the video, what would make sense to keep you engaged more and want to keep watching more, and then want to see what's coming next more. And so your tips of rearranging stuff, like, really your feedback was you were the only one that was like willing to, I wouldn't call it negative feedback. It was like constructive feedback of, hey, you should incorporate your family more, and you should incorporate this more and take that out. And so that was kind of the feedback around that. It's really hard for me to be like, so did I do good? Like, what do you think? Was I super good? And it's not my...
Learned a song, right?
Like, I'll post on it. And I think for me, like, the synopsis at the end of what we've been talking about here is probably the most important part of that. And that's the feedback that Caitlin has gotten from some of her friends, is like, the message at the end is what I've needed, because I felt inadequate in certain things because I wasn't good at them immediately. So hopefully that's what people can take.
Well, any last words on it? I guess with the part you're talking about, where you kind of give this heartfelt synopsis on the 7 sessions that you put in, and everything can be difficult the first few times you do it, but eventually you can push through and get through it, I think, is the idea of what you said. But I guess, do you think that applies to everything?
Yeah, I think that you will get better at anything. You will be better at pretty much everything your 10th time trying it than you were your first time trying it. And then you'll be a lot better your 100th time trying it than you were your first time trying it. And then I think what's also interesting with this is I'm a pretty fearful person in terms of, I'm afraid to do things, either because I'll get hurt or because I don't want to look stupid. And so this kind of gave me a reason to, you know what, at this point in my life, I have missed out on so many potentially awesome experiences because I was just afraid to try it. And as I'm walking up to that piano in the airport, it was very much a thought of like, let's just call it. Like, this is absurd.
Nobody needs to see this edit.
Why are we doing this? Like, I'm not going to start this channel. This is just silly. So there's always that thing there. And so whatever comes of this, right? Like flying, as I think through how would I accomplish that would force me to get over a huge fear of something that I've always had, or any of these other things. And so I think that if we try new things, who knows what will come of that? And in the world, people are super passionate about so many things. And you can go on YouTube, and if you want to look up growing peas in a garden, there's an entire community of growing peas in a garden. If you want to learn how to build Legos, there's a huge community of people who know all about Legos. And so people get so passionate about certain things, and maybe there's something that I can get super passionate. You're super passionate about pickleball, right? there's certain, maybe I can get super passionate about something that I didn't even know was there just because I tried it. And so you can kind of filter through, why not try it and see? So piano for me is awesome. I love it. There might be stuff where I'm like, yeah, like pickleball for me is fun, but I can't say that I'm crazy passionate about it if like that's all I want to do. For those 7 days, all I want to do is play the piano. I was just like, everything's getting in the way of playing the piano right now. And that's okay because life happens and we did stuff, but that was a cool feeling to have again. Super excited about it. And maybe that'll be the same with Legos. Maybe that'll be the same. Friend I was talking to is super into long range shooting with guns. And I'm not like a big gun guy, but that would be kind of a cool skill to learn. And what would that look like? And I don't think I'm going to go like super into guns, but that's another one of just, I don't know. I've never shot long range shooting like that. So that could be cool. Maybe you should come along with that one.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. What else? Is that all?
That's all I got.
Okay. Thanks for coming over.
You want?
That's the other. Should we incorporate other people? So now it's like, okay,
Well,
I did the piano. Now I get to challenge you to something.
I think you should. Well, not necessarily challenge someone to it, but I think an aspect of it is that kind of what you just talked about is that, hey, I kind of found something that I didn't realize I would be into.
Mm-hmm.
And now everything's getting in the way of me playing piano. Like how many times in both of our lives that, you know, you and I picked what we liked pretty early in life, that we liked sports, and that from the age of like 3rd grade on, that's all I did.
Yeah.
I don't have any other hobbies. I didn't ever have any other hobbies.
Yeah.
But there probably is things that like are things that I would be super into if I ever did them.
Yeah.
And so I think that should be an aspect of this, is that if someone, you know, thinks that they could have, like you listened to this song for the first time at your daughter's piano recital and you said, that's beautiful. I want to learn to play that. I'm going to.
Mm-hmm.
All of us have probably experienced something like that, that would have like, I watched Lego Masters and I really want to learn how to just get a bucket of Legos and build whatever my mind sets on.
Yeah.
All of us probably have something like that we're just kind of too afraid to do.
Yeah.
That I think that if you had this challenge, this requirement or whatever it would be, that I think it would motivate the average person to push through like the first 2 days that sounds like are just hell.
Yeah.
To actually get to a point where they are confident in that thing, and then maybe find something new that they are incredibly passionate about.
Yeah. Well, and like the first 2 days of hell, I think is relative too. It'll be frustrating for sure. But I think we limit ourselves so much of when I first think of Legos, right? I'm like, I am not the engineering mind. I'm not an architectural mind. I'm not that creative when it comes to artistic things, music included, drawing, painting, things like that, where it's like creative, create something out of nothing essentially. I don't have that skill set. And so I think it's easy for me to limit myself in that and not pursue that or not try it. And I think a lot of these creatives, Ed Sheeran, who's one of my favorite singers, has that where they're like, man, you're just so talented and you're so gifted. You were just born with this gift of music. And he's like, no, I wasn't. And then he plays a song of him at like 16 years old and he sounds terrible. His voice is not good. He doesn't know how to play the guitar. He's like, you don't understand how many hours I have put into this. Like this is not some God-given talent. Yes, I'm blessed in certain areas, but this is all just hard work and effort. And so that's where it's like, oh, I'm not creative. I haven't done things to put me in creative positions. And I have in other areas, right? Like go on a basketball court and there's creativity that happens in there. But for me to draw something or paint something, like that's just not something I've done. So of course it's easy for me to say, oh, I'm not good at that, but who knows? You just got to try it. So hopefully other people have that too. If you have something in your mind like, oh, I wish I would have tried that, try it.
I'm on board for the Legos.
Yeah, I'll get you in there. Eli would love it. Okay, well, tune in for the next one. Comment if you have anything you want me to learn.
Just 7 days of handstands.
7 days of handstands.